Hi, and welcome to the ordinary meeting of council this morning. We still do have an issue. Is it worth trying Eric's off?
No, it's already off.
Eric.
I need to remove all the stuff. Well, obviously got one that's not working properly. Even David's not showing now either. Yeah, but we will try and, yeah, it's going to be a bit distracting, isn't it? If I move to apologies, we have apologies from Lloyd Essler. We don't have Eric for lateness and Bonnie. So one for Lloyd and one for Bonnie. Moved by Neville.
I'll see.
Seconded by Alvin. All in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we'll move to item 3, declarations of interest. I'm not aware of any this morning. Public forums, petitions, deputations, not aware of any this morning. So we'll move to item 5, which is the presentation to Craig Sinclair. And I think we might have Angus and one or two others coming forward.
Thank you, Chairman, councillors and the audience. It gives me great pleasure to present Craig Sinclair with a certificate of service to Emergency Management Southland after 10 years of slaving away over in that building at the back. He's seen Bovis, COVID, floods, tempests, fires at Nelson, and all the other things that have been happening to us in the last few years. And he's been an active participant and a leader over there, a community leader. He's always been thoroughly professional. And he's part of the best prepared EMS in New Zealand, I would suggest. But, he was singled out for a special mention when I went to a local government meeting. One of the mayors from Nelson mentioned that Craig had been a great help to them during the fires, doing the cordons, and he sought me out to tell me that. So anyway, he hasn't lost his sense of humour apparently. So on behalf of us, Craig, thank you very much for your service. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Neville. I think we have an emergency management set up in Southland that is the envy of other parts of the country. They do a fantastic job. I know a whole lot of the staff were part of the emergency earlier in the year with the flooding. So not only thanks to Craig, but thanks to all those that have been part of that. Okay, we'll move to item 6, which is the confirmation of minutes. The first up is the ordinary meeting of council of the 28th of October. Moved by Lyndall.
No,
You're not, we've got a addition.
Chairman, if I may. Just around the wording in number 4, the public forum, the wording around the group work that spoke to us as a deputation, I just wondered if perhaps it might be more accurate wording for representing the rural community and farmers, because I'm not sure that they were representing everybody. So maybe, I'm not sure what would be more appropriate, but perhaps their region, they're part of the region,
A section of farmers.
Or just some farmers or rural parts of the rural community, or some other wording, because I'm not sure that they represented all farmers.
That's a good point, and they didn't, from memory, they didn't actually say they were representing all farmers. They were representing a group, and I'm sure we can adjust that to accurately reflect the meeting.
It's a group of farmers.
Yeah.
Any further alterations or additions to those minutes? If not, would somebody like to move they've accepted it as a true and correct report?
Mr. Chairman.
Moved by Ellen, seconded by David. No further discussion, I will put the motion. All in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Against no, carried. The second lot of minutes is the emergency meeting of, emergency management, it should say, meeting of, it's the emergency meeting of council is quite correct. Also on the 28th of October.
Mr. Chair, just for clarification, emergency meeting and extraordinary meeting, I would have thought that was an extraordinary meeting, not an emergency, because we dealt with some issues of the day that needed to meet a timeline. Is that technically correct, what we've actually said there?
I suspect it's probably the timeline, and we had a deadline to meet over the funding, but Jan might be able to help us out on that.
It's ruled around our standing orders, and it's to do with the timeline, but also who called the meeting. The chief executive can't call an extraordinary meeting, but he can call an emergency meeting.
So with that explanation,
I'll move.
Moved by Lloyd, seconded by Jeremy. Any further discussion? I will put the motion. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Against no, carried. And the third in that lineup is the extraordinary meeting of council of the 26th of November. Any alterations or corrections to those minutes?
I'll move.
Moved by Lyndall, seconded by Eric. All in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we'll move to item 7, which is the adoption of council resolutions. The first up is the Organisational Performance and Audit Committee meeting of the 19th of November. Lyndall, would you like to comment on your meeting?
No, I'll take it as read actually. The annual report week is obvious now. My only comment would be to thank staff for the excellent work in getting that prepared. So I will move that.
Lyndall, moved by Lyndall, seconded by Lloyd. With that resolution, all in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Second is the South and Civil Defence Emergency Management Group meeting of the 23rd of November. Neville, would you like to comment on that?
Thank you, Chairman. I'll take them as read. Anyway, the prime item on there is item 1, when Angus Mackay, our current manager, has submitted his resignation from the South End to take up a position in MPI as a leader of their response groups up there. I think he's the ideal person for such a position with his background and experience, but certainly be a loss to us. So if Angus was still here, I'd say pass on our best wishes and congratulations.
Yes, no, I think that's very much in order. A seconder for that meeting, moved by Peter. All in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we'll move to the Strategy and Policy Committee meeting of the
Happy
20th.
to move, Mr. Chairman, and I think it only comment I would make is there was quite a degree of enthusiasm for the work done by the People and Water Land Program, Te Mana Te Tangata, OTY, and on page 35 of the resultant resolutions that were made, that was a very productive meeting.
Thank you, Eric. Seconder for that, David. Any further discussion? I will put that motion. All in favour will say aye.
Aye.
There's no carry. We'll move to the regulatory meeting of the 25th of November. Neville, would you like to comment on your meeting?
Trying to find which page was it on?
40.
Well, thank you, Jim. We had quite a good meeting and some good discussion. There's nothing particular that came out of that I need to bring to the attention of council. I will answer any questions.
I think probably one of the significant things was the annual compliance monitoring report, which is now out in the public domain. We're one of the councils that still does produce those, and I think it's a good thing for transparency. Somebody like to second the minutes of that meeting? Seconded by Lloyd. All in favour will say aye. We'll move to the Organisation, Performance and Audit Committee meeting of the 26th of November. Linda?
Happy to move those for adoption, the resolutions for adoption, Chairman.
Moved by Linda, seconder for that motion. I will. Seconded by Neville. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Against, no, carried. Right, the Regional Services Committee meeting of the 26th of November. Jeremy, would you like to comment on that meeting?
I'll take what it's been read. It was a reasonably quick meeting in regards to progress in all the works and bits and pieces, so not too much to discuss.
Happy to second.
Moved and seconded. All in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Right, we'll move to item 8, which is the notification of extraordinary and urgent business, supplementary reports. Other, I'm not aware of any this morning. Right, move to item 9. Questions? Robert, you have a question this morning.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to ask a question. It's around climate change, and I'm asking in light of the government's significant declaration of a climate emergency, and also at the recent election, you'll be well aware that Southland has changed its allegiance in some ways, and the majority of Southlanders voted for a Labour government and their mandate, and given that part of their mandate is to declare a climate emergency, I think that we need to have a rethink. So my question is, in light of the government's declaration of a climate change emergency, will this council, which now finds itself out of step with and behind central government's position on climate change, upgrade its present approach to match that of many other councils around New Zealand and that of central government?
Thank you for that question, Robert. We're probably all delighted that the government have declared a climate change emergency. And really, I think for the community, this is actually taking the climate change issue seriously. And we absolutely support the government on that. It's actually much better to have national direction. This will give us an opportunity as a region to feed in that regional flavour going forward. I think we have a real opportunity to do that. I know we, after our climate change subcommittee meeting the other day, we will go back to policy and strategy, and it's essentially setting out, putting our own house in order. But we know this is a live issue. It is going to permeate through society, and absolutely supportive of that. As to being out of step, actually I think with our action plan, and okay, it's been a bit slower coming out because of COVID, but we're actually doing stuff. We started off with look for the science, one of the few regions to move early to get a NEWA report on the implications of climate change. And in recent times, we've been rewarded for our action plan on the flood banks. Our flood system was tested back in February. As a response, we identified weaknesses, and we're now in a position where we can actually move very quickly to upgrade those stock banks. We also have put money forward for LIDAR, also supported by government. Again, another really important tool in climate change. So I think we are well on the way, and I think we are leaders, not followers, and I think from my point of view is we will continue to do the job that we need to do for our community. There will always be regional flavour. I note that the government also set up a climate commission with some pretty competent people on that. And actually I think rather than being ad hoc, national direction, regional flavour is really the way forward. Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'll just express a view. I won't ask a question, but just in your comments there, Mr. Chairman, talked about happy to defer to central government, but when we talk about fresh water, we talk about local solutions for local issues. Shouldn't climate change be the same? And I don't understand the difference there. But what I would like to say is that I wasn't here on the council when that vote was had around the climate emergency, but I understood that we gave a commitment to Southland around one of urgency, and a subcommittee was developed, and the subcommittee that reports to another subcommittee, I don't think is in line with Southlanders' views on the issue of climate change. I think we need to give more importance to it. So my suggestion would be for this council in the new year is to have serious discussions about setting up a standalone resourced committee to deal with climate change and its effects on the province and the infrastructure that serves the people of Southland. And then we need to go further and start bringing in other people, relevant councils from Southland into the fold too, to have those discussions too.
We're remarkably close actually to the recommendations of the subcommittee the other day. Small group's job is about done. It'll report back to policy and strategy in the short term, but the discussion there was this is really a whole of council issue. There's a lot, everybody has an interest in it, and there's likely to be an item meeting in February where we were talking to all the councils of Southland. So you're quite right. This is an issue that is going to be ongoing, and my view is you can't put it in the box. Everything we do is going to have a climate change component going forward, whether it's sea level rise, whether it's flood banks, protecting assets, protecting people. It will just become part of what we do. Lyndall.
A comment, if I may, rather than a question. I would like to think that we're in a far better position now than we were with regards to how we perceive climate change impacting our work. And to reinforce Peter's point a wee bit, and Chairman Horrell's actually, there's climate change, in my humble opinion, is something that we need to consider every time we make a decision around this table. So somehow we have to find a way to thread that climate change lens through all the work that we do, and I hate to think that we formed a subcommittee, but we did. But the work that committee has done has given us a really good picture of where we're at, and the work that we're already doing, and it's a really positive support for what the government is insisting that we do. If we institute some kind of way that there's a lens that we apply to every decision that we make, and if that's in the form of a dedicated committee or a dedicated staff member somehow, then that would be something that I'd be very keen on. So I think we're in a way better position than we used to be, and certainly I've heard some way more positive and way more way broader conversations around this table than I'd heard before. So I wouldn't write off the work of the subcommittee. I think they've done a good job, but now's the time for the next step, and I think that's a fairly, it needs to be a quick step, perhaps a foxtrot. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Lev. Now, because of the interest around the table, I've allowed a little bit more leeway over a question. But look, I'm quite proud of this council. We are leaders, not followers, and we will continue to do what we need to do. Peter did mention government direction. Well, the water's the same. We actually have an MPS that we have to give effect to, but we also can put in some regional flavour, and that's where I think we'll go on that. So thanks for that discussion. We will now move to Chairman and Councillors' reports. I'll briefly report on, I guess we had a meeting with Ministers Wood and Robertson last Friday over the TY situation. Good to be at that meeting. We didn't get any clear answers, but the discussions are still going on, and we will watch the space very carefully. As a regional authority, we will have a part in government's concerns over what environmental waste products may be on that site. So this is something that is still developing. I also attended in the last couple of weeks a meeting in Beacon Lamb, which Peter was also at, And that was a very positive meeting, and I thought that on a panel we had the chairman of Beef and Lamb, Federated Farmers President, and myself answering questions. We were all very much on the same page on moving forward the water debate and doing the right thing. So look, it's the old story. It's the power of having diverse people come with the same language. And on that note, I see Lucy sitting there, and I'd like to congratulate Lucy for the work she did with the working party that was set up after the Hui in Southland, reported back to the ministers earlier this week. Very diverse group who came up with some very, very good suggestions, which I believe will be looked at favourably by government. But that coordination role takes some skill, and I'm very proud of our staff and Lucy for the job they did with that. So I think there'll be a press release later today, and those findings will go out to councillors. But I think, again, this is a partnership between regional government and government, all wanting the same results. We all want to improve water quality, and just getting regulations that will do the job. Any further reports?
Hey, Mr. Chairman, just for your information to council, I attended with Lucy and Bernadette Hunt a community meeting at Takanui on the 3rd of December, and the community had asked for assistance to understand the rules around the NES and the NPS and the direction of council, and Lucy and Bernadette did a joint presentation which was received very, very well, with some good robust questions at the end. We didn't want to overpromise, but we wanted to give them a clear understanding of what was happening, and they got that. I just want to thank Lucy for that time, and it was well received by the community. So I think we will see more of those meetings in the future, and we need to participate and be open and honest about where we are, and I think we were that, and I think it was very well received. They enjoyed having a joint presentation because it showed that, as you indicated before, all parties were trying to understand it from their perspective, and they were trying to find the best outcome to meet the government's direction of travel, and they were trying to find their best way through that. So the community was, if I said quite quiet, but they had good questions about trying to get the best understanding they could.
Thanks, Lloyd. Peter?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I attended the Dipton Catchment Group meeting on the 25th of November. It was really good. Two staff, ES staff members were there, gave a very good presentation. Also on the 30th, the Great South Carbon Neutral Project meeting, and it was quite clear that local businesses are seeing low carbon as moving to low carbon as future-proofing their businesses and gaining a competitive edge. A question was asked of me, where's regional leadership around climate change? We've just been discussing this earlier, of course. I couldn't really answer that question, but there is a large gap there, and it's quite obvious that they are looking for direction. But it was really good to see the things that are happening in the province around zero carbon. And of course, we did, like you said, the Beef and Lamb New Zealand meeting in Winton, which was a good show of regional leadership with yourself, Andrew Morrison, and Jeffrey Young too, all on the same page.
Thanks for that, Peter. Any further reports this morning? Being the last meeting of the year, we've had a difficult year. Everybody's had a difficult year, and I'd just like to thank the council, but also the staff for the work they've put on. I believe we work very well together. We're governance, but there is a real partnership that goes on, and we've had quite a few milestones this year. The improvement in water grazing, and again, that was a diverse group that came together, and everybody speaking off the same page, as Peter was just saying, is quite powerful. Giving clear messages to the public is going to be part of our job going forward. At the end of this year, we're seeing some reasonably exciting developments: the green hydrogen, the possibility of a data centre in the south. After a year that's had a few negatives and quite a bit of anxiety for people. It may be finishing on a good note, so who knows what 2021 will bring, but hopefully everybody will come back refreshed to deal with the issues of the new year.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, could I just follow on from that? I think through that, your comments are quite valid, that we've had a quite interesting and disruptive but also accomplished year, but we're losing some staff who are moving on to greater things because of that platform and experience that they've gained through here. So I just through you wish them well for the future, and we look forward to working with them in new roles going forward. We thank you for their contribution.
Thank you, Lloyd. Okay, we will move to item 11, staff report, and the first up is the Chief Executive's report. Rob, we will hand over to you to speak to your report.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I'll take the report as read. Just a couple of wee things. You've covered the intensive winter grazing work well. I'll touch on that. There's also a lot of work going on in the organisation around the impact of the NPS and NES. So our consents and compliance and our planning teams in particular have been working on that, and you'll see that coming through our LTP conversations, and also a lot of work on the LTP as we shake that up. And we've been involved in a series of workshops, so they'll continue. So, Chair, I won't. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Lloyd.
Chairman, on page 65 under biosecurity, there's a comment there in the second bottom bullet point around non-compliance action of a boat that's travelled in and out of Bluff and Fiordland. I just wondered whether we were strong enough there. I see that the clean vessel pass has been rescinded, but were we strong enough there? Did we? Because it didn't read as if we had implemented their policy as strongly as I thought we would have.
So that's an ongoing investigation. I think the issue is around non-compliance rather than us issuing the pass. So, but we're working through that. So I think it's probably best left at that point.
Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for your report there, Rob. I just see on page 61, regional level meetings. There's a comment at the bottom. The focus of the meeting included central government water reforms and then working more collaboratively, both between our councils and also across the South Island. Would you like to elaborate on those discussions and give us a rough direction on those, how those discussions took place?
Through your chair, there's a growing conversation amongst the cities and the chairs around the amount of work coming at us through the NPS and NES fresh water, which has brought us to a focus. We've got to be, everyone agrees, we've got to be looking at doing things differently, noting we're all under common, a lot of the issues facing us are common with some regional flavours. So we're looking at what we can do collectively, not just share information, but actually plan and actually get some joined up work programs. There's the South Island, the South Island Regional Councils, Otago, Canterbury, ourselves, and more recently the West Coast have formed a governance group with the chairs and cities, and we've got another meeting, I think, just before Christmas, the cities to progress what the work program looks like. So we're exploring opportunities for us to be doing things collectively and that ranges across our business. It's a little bit of focus on water. So everyone agrees at a high level. Our challenge is to turn that into a joint up work program. So we're very focused on looking at what's possible.
Alan. Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. So just under the area you talked about land and water services, demand has been high for land sustainability and education services, especially for catchment groups via Thriving South. And so we had that discussion earlier about climate change. At what point does the skill set of our land sustainability staff, is it time to ensure that they're upskilling in facilitating, helping farmers on their journey for a lower carbon position? So there's a program obviously set through nationally as a Here Waka Eka Noa, and there's obviously a number of people who are involved in that. At what point does it move down to a regional level and our staff become aware of how they can facilitate help in that process.
So our staff are skilled in facilitation and working with groups. It's a skill that can work across a number of different areas. So that's regardless of the issue they're dealing with. There's an ongoing conversation around how does climate change link in terms of our water quality programs. What are the synergies there? And I guess that will be shaped up and also be shaped up as part of the work you're doing as a councillor around our role in climate change. So it'll then flow out of that conversation as to actually what does that mean on the ground. If there's a need for any upskilling, we'll certainly do that. But at this stage, actually, a lot of things we're doing to improve water quality also have some benefits around climate change. So that actually the two are quite complementary. There may be some more, and we'll be clear around that as we shape things up.
And just on that, I'm conscious that our land sus guys are being asked to do more across a wider range of things, and sometimes it's actually just giving the link to people to go, so whether it's a billion trees or whatever else. We probably don't have to reinvent the wheel, but as long as they know where to give it to people, that may be the more efficient way of doing it. Any further questions for Rob's report? Would somebody like to move Rob's report? Moved by Lloyd, seconded by Peter. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Right. We do have friends waiting in the room probably for item 4. So we'll actually jump down to item 4, which is change of trustee composition for the Tiwai Para Trust, which is page 100. Welcome, Jonathan. Would you like to?
What's the form? Slightly administrative. I can see Ken's shining face here, but I'm not quite.
Kia ora, Ken.
Kia ora, Ken. Look, let's just. I can see myself in the distance. Thank you all. This is one of those interesting things. It's a relatively straightforward administrative matter, but it represents the culmination of quite a lot of work over a number of years from the Whakamauna Tiwai project. I'll take the paper as read and I'll answer any questions, but just to say that as part of one of the key outcomes we set through the Whakamauna Tiwai project, through the freshwater improvement funding funded through MFE, was the ability to improve access to and provide for the Ararua Runanga to operate as kaitiaki on the traditional lands of their peoples, and this is a step towards achieving that. It's administrative. We transfer ourselves out of the trust that was established under the funding deed with MFE, but nonetheless it's significant. So I commend it to Council.
And through your chair, can I just emphasise, it may be administrative, that Jonathan said, but also hugely important. It's a combination of a lot of work, and this is going to deliver a key outcome for the whole project. So,
and, you know, councillors have been involved, the community has been involved. It's a number of years of work.
And I think, you know, this does actually signal quite a milestone on our journey in the Waituna area. And I know how significant getting access to land in this catchment is to local iwi. So this item, we have two trusts down there currently. One is the Waituna Trust, but the Tiwai Para was set up really as a vehicle to purchase land purchases that were deemed to be
Through MFE.
Through MFE, etc., to actually enhance the quality of the lagoon. And at this stage of it, that work's pretty much done, and how do we actually continue to administer it? This is an ideal way forward. We've got a structure already in place, and what we're doing here is actually handing that structure over to iwi, and Look, I'd like to acknowledge the work that Dean and Lloyd and a number of others have done over the last couple of years in quite complex negotiations. I mean, we, at Waituna, it's probably been a bit of a guinea pig. We've probably made more progress with that freshwater money than a lot of others have. Very diverse group, but really good to see some of these milestones taking place. And okay, we've still got a lot of work to do down there, but it has been, I believe, a really exciting journey. There's always issues to overcome, but I believe we have a really good camaraderie and trust and confidence with a whole range of people, and those are the things that get things done. So look, I'm quite excited about this today. Lloyd, would you like to?
Well, I think, Mr. Chair, you've summed it up pretty well. This has been a journey for quite some time, and it's not just a few months, it's been quite a number of years since we first started this project, and we're now at a point where we can facilitate one of the key objectives here, and this is the appropriate way to do it. It's probably a little bit earlier than we thought originally, but in this project we've made a number of changes on the way through to achieve our key outcomes. So like you, Mr. Chairman, the work that Dean and his fellow representatives have done here has been huge. You can't put it forward in a two-page paper to understand what's actually happened to get to this point, but it's with great excitement and privilege that we move this forward. I know the outside directors are also very keen for this to move forward as well, and that's been a process. So we're at this point, Mr. Chair, and I'm actually more than happy to move this from a council perspective, that the recommendations that are sitting in front of us come forward, and I welcome any other discussion that is needed to have.
And I know it's a bit unusual, but I'll accept that. But would Dean or either of you like to actually comment? I think this is a special moment. So look, if you would like to comment, I'm happy to do that before we move forward.
Tū whaketia hau I mui a koutou, I ki rongi tēnei kaupapa tarane, I puta atu ki roto I tō tepu nei. Nā reira, he mihi atu, I tautoko the mihi atu ki a koutou katoa, ki rongi tēnei kaupapa. Mihi atu ki a koe tēnei rangatira mō tō whakahaere tanga o tō tātou kaupapa. Nā reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Just feel really humbled that we've worked together to get to this space and or this place actually. And it always sort of reminds me of the days back when we went through the Naito settlement claim, and the tall tree, which was Mahinga Kai, was one of the 9 tall trees. The other 8 were land settlement claims, and this one for us, Naito anyhow, the Mahinga Kai aspect of the claim, is sort of this is what this is about. So I just want to support everything that's been said here, Nicole and Lloyd, Jonathan and Sue, for where we've got to this place, and it's an exciting place to be. We realise that there's things to do going forward, but the Whakamanata Waituna project as a whole, from the top of the catchment to the bottom, it's very exciting, and we've made some really good progress over the years, and it's we look upon it as a real what's the word? Pilot for other things we can do across other catchments. So thank you all very much, the council, for your support. Iwi, as I say again, are very excited about where we've got, and we look forward to working with council to get us along to the next stages of working together. So yeah, I just feel very humbled, and especially for the work that the council have done to support iwi in this project. So tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question. So, how much land is involved in the transfer, or how much land is involved in the trust, the MFE help fund?
Oh, 400 and something hectares, I think. I can't tell you off the top of my head, actually. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So, roughly 400 hectares.
Yeah, I'll give you exact. I can't give you exact figure off the top of my head. You know.
It's a little bit more than that, but the main thing is there's crucial farms that have been bought to actually facilitate this buffer, and we've done a little bit of land trading to get the right areas to suit this, and this has been across the east and west end of the catchment. So it's not just one block of land, it's actually parcels of land.
The 45 component, the wetland connection, in areas of land that were already under significant inundation pressure. So it's bringing that in, and it brings it in to a framework that connects it with the existing land where a kaitiaki role is not able to be undertaken due to wider situations with the land and being dot reserve and scientific reserve. So this brings that land next to it, adjacent to it, and allows that kaitiaki to be undertaken, which is a significant outcome and what MFE was aiming for in part of the project.
So will this land continue to be farmed, or will this land then be?
There's a whole project to, Dean might talk to it, but it'll be converted back to kaitiaki type activities. Tuna, water polish, we call them water polishing or water treatment sites like constructed wetlands to capture sediment and get all those types of things are what will happen in that space. Yeah.
Robert.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, can I just ask, maybe Dean might be able to answer this, but in terms of the mahinga kai qualities and values, have they been assessed well already, and will they be continued to be watched and monitored and assessed using either council standards or cultural iwi standards? I'm interested to know what information we might get back as time goes by.
I have answered half of things, there is a mahinga kai pa plan done under a cultural lens, which encapsulates all of those things you've just mentioned, and it will be a partnership with council. Yeah, so it's done through a cultural lens, connecting to place, environmental and outcomes. So yes, there is a framework there to deal with that.
So I think we present, I'm not sure if we presented on this table the Mahinga Kai Pa plan that fits into the Whakamanā Te Waituna project as a whole. But the intentions of Mahinga Kai Pa, as Jonathan rightly said, is kaitiakitanga. Now, the MFE restrictions, there will be covenants that we have to abide by with this land coming back, in the hands of being managed by Awadua and through the Mahinga Kai Pa. So there's covenants, the animals will come off the property. They're actually off the property now, and we'll have a whole lot of opportunities to form this Mahinga Kai, which will include, as Jonathan said, ponding, and will help achieve some of the outcomes of the Whakamana Te Waituna partners, is potentially interception of the water, potentially to create what we call water polishing, opportunities around food gathering, Mahinga Kai gathering, biodiversity and education. We've got scientists already asking to come across and see what some of the, as we transfer back into this concept of Mahinga Kai, what does improvements look like? So it'll be heavily monitored because we want it to be. We want to know what we're doing makes sense, and that it's so when we do ponding, what does that look like in terms of are we doing it correctly and those sorts of things. So yeah, a lot of people that want to come and do science on the property. So yeah, the overall intention is that it's a place for us to collect Mahinga Kai. We've that disconnection from the lagoon, from the scientific reserve status that's on the lagoon at the moment, doesn't allow us to go and get the traditional foods that we've had. Through forming this buffer, we were able to achieve some hydrological outcomes in terms of the health of the lagoon, but it also will help that land get a little bit wetter, and we believe that through the land being wetter, that's going to help our Mahinga Kai and grow more opportunities around that. So,
Mr. Chairman, as a quick supplementary, could I just ask, in terms of that projection into the future, are you factoring in climate change as we know it now?
yeah. We've talked about climate change and what the future might look like on that property. There's a site I was overseas last year looking at the Chesapeake Bay and what they're doing over there, the Nature Conservancy, in terms of buying land close to close to the coast, they'll be in the future, I don't know, 20, 30 or 40 years, they may be the seagrass of the future, those close properties to the coast. So, we might have to step back. So there is no, we're not, should I say, concerned too much about what might happen to that land in 30 years, 40 years' time, because our children, it's up to them. We want them to deal with what climate change looks like. So we understand it might be climate change, that farm may be underwater in 20 or 30 years, but that's something that we think may happen, or potentially could happen, and it's up to our ones to deal with that as part of learning.
It would also allow us additional resilience in water coming out of the catchment as climate change impacts on the intensity and patterns of rainfall. It gives the ability to do that as well.
Thank you. I've got Lloyd, David, then Alan. Lloyd.
So I think we're getting a little bit confused here. I think some of the questions that have been asked, which are good questions, but we probably need to come back, and I've got my coach hat on when I say this, is that there is a work stream through the Whakamanatua Tuna Trust. And that's where a lot of this discussion needs to happen, because that's where you'll actually see the activity, you'll see the work programs and discussion with the community. The paper that before us is really the Tiwai Para Trust, is the land owning trust, of which at the moment it is iwi and ES together. And the paper really says we're at a point in time now in this process where we can actually pull back from the ES ownership. We've done the heavy lifting through the processes that have come from Wellington to get the land transferred through and in the right place. And it's now in a format where we can actually put that to iwi, which actually is a milestone for them. But the Whakamanatua Tuna Trust will carry on, and one of the things we'll deal with in the next paper is the representatives from this table to their trust for the work streams that are in front of us, which includes everything from climate change to sediment traps to all that criteria. So if I may, Mr. Chairman, I think we're getting a little bit off track, and it might be better for us to come back and bring some of the key people from the Whakamanatua Tuna Trust to here to have a discussion or maybe a workshop around some of the things that we can face together. This project overall is, we think, very important for Southland as a region, and some of the work that's down here may be able to be, we hope, will be able to be transferred into the wider catchments through the FMU process to actually mitigate some of the issues that we have. So I just want to try and bring it back to the core issue that is here, if I may.
No, thanks for that, Lloyd. I've got David, then Alan.
Mr. Chairman, I'm probably going to go away from the core issue here again, but I just wondered, without the support of the Waituna community down there, I mean, obviously this would have been a bit more of a struggle. I know there's still more work to do, but I just wondered whether that community has been thanked for their involvement, obviously, in the whole process, publicly, because there's been purchases of properties which have probably been family properties for some time, and so really without their support, this probably would never have happened. It would have been a hell of a lot harder to happen than what it has.
No, that's a very good point, David, and I know the trust will be planning on doing something like that. It'd be a good chance to get a minister down, because we'd like some more money to actually celebrate the progress that has actually been made, and that is I know a high priority for the trust is to actually be able to go back and connect with the local community and sort of basically have a conversation of where we've got to. We've got Alan, and we might start to wind this up, I think. And Jeremy.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So I put a farmer's hat back on again, and just ensure a question that it's a large area of land that has obviously native vegetation, and it has some of our imported vegetation down there. Are you ensuring that there's still going to be an income stream for this land so that it can support the control of some of the introduced weeds and species that are down there, and obviously also ensuring that you're going to have some revenue for management of and additional planting? So can we have confidence that the land's going to be in 5, 10, 15 years' time an attractive and not, and I don't want to say it, but it's just, it's difficult country.
The answer is yes.
I hope it's yes.
No, I think that's a good answer because we are getting a wee bit off the topic. Jeremy?
Just to clarify, is this all the land?
No.
No, it's not. Okay.
Yes.
Simple
No,
question.
yes and no. Any other questions?
Lyndall?
I would like to second the motion, thank you.
The motion has been moved and seconded. I will put the motion. All those in favour will say aye. Aye. Against, no. Carried. Thank you.
Yeah, we need to do the next one, that completes it.
Do it now? No. Now, while we're on this, we'll move to item 5, which is the appointment of trustees to the Whakawana Waituna Charitable Trust.
Thank you, Chair, through the Chair. This again is administrative and conscious of time. Council currently has 2 members on the Whakawana Waituna Charitable Trust doing the fundamental work around the Whakawana Waituna program, which is a program involving 7 partners from Terra, Matahu, Ararua, Dock, Southland District Council, Living Water, and Southland. We're just asking to reappoint 2 trustees, and we note that there's a change in who would act as the co-chair, that shifting from Councillor McCallum to.
I'll move the recommendation. Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the topic? I think, it's actually great to see this trust evolving and moving forward, and I think, the experiences there will eventually we'll probably have trustees coming forward, but at the moment I think it's good to have the initial ones there to actually see this thing through to a more stable landing place. And so we've been moved and seconded. I will put the motion. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Against, no. Carried. Right, we can go back to item 2. Okay, item 2 is the 2021 to 31 plan development, adoption of policies. Welcome, Wilma.
Hello, Councillors. Hello. And kia ora to Ken, who's sort of virtually sitting next to me for this part of papers. Councillors, you recall that on the 1st of December we had a workshop at which we were discussing some of the policies that go forward to be incorporated into the LTP, and we made some small amendments to those as a result of the workshop, and we've now brought them back to you for adoption. There are 3, 2 in this paper and then a separate paper of significance and engagement. So just like to say that there are a couple of things in the marine fee reserve policy that I'm sorry to say I haven't highlighted well for you, which I just want to point out for the get to it, because we did add a couple of paragraphs into that policy to ensure that it was consistent with the latest work on the deed agreement. And those I think are self-evident, but I will point them out to you when we get to that paper. Mr. Chair, how would you like to proceed with this conversation? Can you take paper by paper?
I think so, yes. We'll deal with the run through them in that order, I think.
All right, so the first paper was the financial contributions paper. You'll recall that we had a conversation about the need to have this and to make it as specific to the areas that are not covered by other aspects of the legislation. Ken, would you like to make any commentary about what's changed? The purpose of getting this policy through today?
Kia ora. Thank you for that. Again, as we've discussed previously, the policy is a mandatory policy, a must-have policy for the LTP. But you'll notice the policy sets up the entire process as a discretion for council. So council does not necessarily have to incorporate any of these financial contributions into their documents. Currently, the council has put it into the coastal plan, which is up for review, and into the old water plan, which is up for review. And whether those components of those plans remain going forward is a matter for you when you get to your decision-making processes for the reviewed documents. In the meantime, the financial contribution policy must be in place ahead of the adoption of the LTP. And other than that, it is basically the same policy that has been in place since 2004. Kia ora.
Thanks for that, Ken. Any comments on?
I think, Mr. Chairman, it's straightforward. We've been through it through the workshop. We understand, we asked quite a few questions about the reasons why and what it would mean in real life. We've done that. This is the paper through after the drafts have been through, and it's for noting, as Ken has suggested. So I think we just need to move on to the next one and understand the change that you put in since our last workshop.
We do need to formally adopt these at the end of this conversation, yeah. So in terms of Councillor Marine fee reserve allocation policy, there was work going on while we were looking at this policy in relation to the deed. So we've added references to the deed into the policy, and those are at paragraph 4, purposes of marine fee. There is a straight reference there in those bullet points to what the funds are generated to do. That's straight out of the deed. And so the following paragraph also says the words as specified in the deed, which was not in the previous version. On the following page 80, we refer in paragraph 5 or point 5 to Schedule 3 of the deed. So that's an insert there just to reference the deed at the appropriate spot. Apart from tidying up the odd little piece of language, the only other substantive part in there is 6.7, where we've inserted a paragraph about reporting to the cruise industry, which is also a reference to what was agreed.
That seems reasonably straightforward. Any questions or comments? And I think those additions are good. I mean, it shows transparency, especially with the marine fleet and reporting back to the cruise ship industry, so they can get some bang for the buck too on what the money's being spent on. I think that's a very sensible addition. If there's no further comments, would somebody like to move the
recommendations 1 and 2, Chair?
Moved by Eric, seconded by Lyndall. Any further discussion? If there's not, I will put the motion. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Against? No.
Thank you. And then item 3 is the adoption of the significance and engagement policy amendments. And again, we discussed this at our LTP workshop earlier in the month. Ken, would you like to just take us through this paper too?
Yep. So this significance and engagement policy is probably one of the key policies next to the revenue and financing policy that you'll deal to for the long-term plan. Again, mandatory. So that what we've done, what we do each time, every 3 years with this policy, we give them a fairly thorough review to make sure that it is fit for purpose. Because if you need to activate the significance part of the policy re a financial matter, then it needs to be robust for that purpose. So in this particular report, I've set out all the proposed amendments, sort of line by line, if you like, so you can see where all the changes have been made and to the extent. Generally, it's tidying up following the legislation change, and it's putting in major changes, putting in a new section at the back relating to engagement with Maori. That's the major component. That particular section is not dissimilar to a couple of our other regional councils in their significance and engagement policies. None of the other councils in Mirahiku have such a component to their policies, although they are interested in adding that sort of work into their policies. And it may well be that we'll end up with a singly worded regional approach to engagement with Maori. And that follows along the line of where the charter is. Now that change in terms of engagement with Maori was handed on to the Te Amarama board for comment. They met a couple of days ago on the 14th, and I got called into that hui. They're more than happy with the approach that the council is contemplating here, and they see it as an extension of where the relationship has got to, how far it's gone, and where it could go next, depending on what the projects might be. One of the things they did comment on, and they've asked you to consider, is to recognise or acknowledge that Ngāi Tahu ki Mirahiku are the first points of contact for any engagement, rather than Maori generally. Now, under the Local Government Act, you'll be aware Maori is talked about in a general sense, and that could be Maori from anywhere in New Zealand. And so what Tammy are looking at is to try and put initial focus for engagement contact between Environment Southland and Tangata Whenua in Mirahiku, basically. Now that's easy enough to do when you get to the policy itself, and I'm just flicking down in the column. On page 100 of your agenda, where engagement with Maori is the new section 8. On that page, there's a series of bullet points. Then below the bullet points, there is a paragraph A and a paragraph B. What I would suggest to you, if you wish to pick up what the board is suggesting, is to replace that A or put a new A in there with words something like, to acknowledge Ngāi Tahu ki Mirahiku as the first point of contact for all engagement processes. Other than that, that's the only other suggested change than what you have in front of you. Kia ora.
Thank you, Ken. Comments?
Yeah, I appreciate your comments, Ken. I'm just looking at that page 100, paragraph A and B. It would occur to me that probably the clause which you've just suggested is A and the other two become B and C.
Yes, I think a new A would go in and everything else just rocks down by the next letter. Yep.
Yep. Yeah, the acknowledgement of status first, then the subsequent actions afterwards. So a new A which covers what you said.
Correct, and then everything else follows down as a B, C, D, E, F, G, whatever.
Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There is a minor pronunciation. There's some parts where you've got Maori doesn't have the read mark above the A and some do, but that's a minor point. I just want to, when you look at the iwi section down the bottom in the new section, there is a huge responsibility on council, and I'm just wondering whether we are fully aligned, because it talks about more responsibility, slower processes, more in-depth processes, discharging of decision making, and I'm not sure whether we are fully aware of that when you play it out in the real world. So that may mean, as I understand it, a different balance around the table possibly, decisions being slower in process, more consultation, which we should be doing anyway, but when you look at those points down there, that is quite a substantial change from where we are today. And approving this policy, we must be aware that that will breed a different approach to some of the matters that this policy covers. I just want to make sure we're aware of that. If we're aware of that, then I've got no problem with it. But I think this is the time to actually really bring forward that, especially in the later part of that section, there will be a change, in my view. Would you like to?
Yeah, I'm going to comment on that. So the way that the engagement strategy is set up is to show a spectrum of engagement moves from, information right through to empowerment, and that's a standard engagement framework. And so this policy is pointing that the decision about what kind of engagement we choose to work with is going to have an effect on how that plays out, which could be to do with the amount of time it takes to collaborate. I mean, I would suggest that in making decisions around where on the spectrum of engagement we are, because the policy doesn't define that, it just explains what will happen when you actually engage in those different ways. That actually the investment in engagement and collaboration at the front end tends to pay dividends in terms of how processes play out following that. So, but it is important for us as an organisation in building those concepts of engagement into our own planning processes, and I think we've demonstrated that through People, Water and Land and the Values and Objectives work, that getting that right at the front end is actually pays dividends in terms of the process going forward. So this doesn't decide what whereabouts on the spectrum we are, it just gives you the spectrum of engagement.
I guess my reading of it is actually putting into the policies what we're practically doing at the moment. Also the changes to the NPS, which specifically talks about iwi involvement. And in some cases, iwi may not want to be involved in a specific thing, but this does empower them. We've already got the invitation to join a couple of our standing committees. So I think really this is just giving us the tools, if you like, to do what we're already doing. That's the way I read it. Further comments or?
Do we need to define what the new A might be for adoption?
I'm sure Ken could be thinking aloud and for the wording he had before.
And what was the statement that you made initially?
The new A might be to acknowledge Ngāi Tahu ki Mirahiku as the first point of contact for all engagement processes. Or words to that effect.
Near enough.
How do you want to handle it, Mr. Chairman? Do you want to accept that as an amendment and then move the whole paper, or how?
Yes,
I think it's important enough. Iwi come back to us with with really one small change, and I think generally we accept that. So
I'll be happy to move a new A as an amendment.
Right, moved by Eric, seconded by Lyndall. Any further discussion on this? If not, I will put
Mr. Chair, we need to know what it is though, surely, rather than a blank line.
Ken read it out.
So, I wrote it down, would you like me to reread it? Yeah, okay, that A, acknowledge Ngāi Tahu ki Mirahiku as the first point of contact for all engagement processes.
Then we flow on to the other two on page 100.
And as part of that, Mr. Chairman, I would think that you put a new A in and the other numbering system
would be in C.
So they become B and C.
Would follow through.
Oh, it goes down to 101.
And
C, D, E, F.
G.
Yep.
H.
Technology is wonderful, isn't it? Okay, so we're clear on what we're voting on? Any further comments or discussion? If Well, I'll take, Eric has moved the event, and so Lynn will second, and I will put the motion. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Against? No. Carried. Okay, we will take this back up the
I'll
agenda.
go back to the
Substantial motion.
So then we need to actually adopt the policy.
Oh, okay. So we haven't done that.
I'll move the recommendations.
Moved by Neville, so that's the updation, it's pretty straightforward. Seconder for that one. Lyndall, all in favour will say aye. Aye. Right, that takes us through to item 7, which is the councillor's meeting schedule. Any additions or changes to the schedule as set out?
Have we done 6?
I think that was, we just did 6 of them, or?
No,
Six.
Oh, we haven't done that. Okay, no, we haven't done the update. That's stuff. Again, that's pretty straightforward. Would somebody like to move item 6? Okay, I will talk. Sorry, I was jumping the gun there. Look, would you like to speak to the item?
Right, kia ora. So the item in front of you is a proposal to amend the delegations relating to consent processing. And it's recommended that council resolve to approve the proposed changes. I'll take the paper as read and open to any questions. Just in summary, these changes are to future-proof the efficient processing of consent applications. Why these changes are necessary, as you've already heard today in Rob's report, the new MPS and NES will see an increase in workloads within the team, and that coupled with the proposed plan moving through the planning process will also see an increase in workloads. So currently all of the decisions on applications, even very minor consents and administrative corrections, sit with team leaders and the consent manager position, and this proposal is to better use our internal triage system and our senior technical staff within the team to move decision-making delegations to the lower levels within the team, as well as that team leader and manager positions as they currently are. So this will make better use of the senior technical skill set within the team and provide or remove those feelings that currently sit there. So open to any questions.
Alan. Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. So on page 115, I got down to, and under section 95.1, decide whether to give public or limited notification of a resource consent application that is determined by section 88. So can you just elaborate a little bit more as to what that one is? So at what point do we move from a delegated position to notification, which is quite a big step in the sense from it's now no more than minor.
So that would be if anything that came in and we accept it under that section 88 check, and it's identified in our triage system. We still have to have a delegation that sits with that section 95 decision-making process because it's in the RMA. If it's basic or routine, in that instance it would be a case where the applicant had requested public notification or something like that. That's the only reason why it would still remain in that space. Other than that, that triage system would pick that up early in the process and it wouldn't sit at that basic or routine level right at the start. And sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah.
That's fine. Lloyd?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question's really around the triage. Do we need, is this an internal triage system or is it an external? And I would sort of have more comment around the external because people see things happening at different speeds and it may not be lost. It's just that we're prioritising where we put our energy. I'm just wondering how we communicated that. The rest of the document to me seemed fine, apart from the fact that I presume that you'll go back and you'll review to make sure that the delegation policy is actually fulfilling its requirements and anything that needs to be addressed you'll come back to us with. But I was just really about that triage part.
Through Mr. Chair, currently the triage system is an internal process that we use to vet applications early in the system and sort of pick up any red flags so that we can make sure that those are dealt with as soon as possible and communicated. Yes, there is scope to move it to an externally facing triage for to provide clarity, better clarity to applicants. But that's part of a bigger communication strategy which needs to be worked with.
Any further questions? Alan?
Just one other, I guess it will get addressed. I would presume that under the titles of who sits above yourself, we've still got an old title in there that will be modified.
They'll flow through, the change will flow through the delegation manual, and we'll bring those to you once we've.
Lyndall?
Mr. Chairman, can you just clarify for me, because I might have missed it, whether there's a kind of a peer review system that runs through the triage system? Because I can't find it in there.
Mr. Chair, yes, we do have a decision-making sort of check where reviews are undertaken of any decisions that are made. So especially if they are something that we haven't come across before, that we don't see often, or if there's a legal question that comes up. So those checks are already in place where we review each other's decisions and discuss them on a daily basis if required, and that would simply be rolled out wider to capture those
Right, so
decisions.
yes,
It's already in place.
So it will apply to a different layer of people. Yep, thanks.
Neville?
Chairman, I'm happy to move the recommendations. You know, it's a time when we've got a substantially increased workload and we're trying to improve the process for the people who are making applications. I think this is a wise move and checks and balances seem to be in place so that the delegations are properly used. So I'm happy to move the recommendation.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Neville. Seconded by Lloyd. Any further discussion? Just one question, I guess. If we were to move into a closer relationship with other regional councils, I'm assuming these changes would actually help with that too. If we had a specialist in ECAN, for instance, that we delegated something to this, some of that thought will have gone into these changes.
Yep. So a number of other councils also use a similar sort of triage system, and yeah, there would be scope there to line up consistency of approaches, especially with the consenting requirements under the NES, because we're dealing with somewhat consistent framework there. Yeah, regional plans a little bit different.
Any further questions? If not, we've moved and seconded. I will move the item. All in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Against? No. Carried. Right, this time we will move to the councillors' meeting schedule. Welcome, Jan.
Morning. This is a council meeting scheduled for this month and through into the beginning of 2021, and it outlines the meetings that we're aware of. You'll have noticed in the last couple of days I've put out a number of workshops and diaries. That's as much as anything to hold the dates. We may or may not use them all, so I haven't got them included in this meetings. I have one meeting to add to the list also, and that's the community meeting at Tokanui on the 3rd of December that Councillor McCullough attended.
The Buff Museum
On behalf of
Any further additions to the schedule, any requests for leave? If not, would somebody like to move?
I'll move, Chairman.
Moved by Neville, seconded by Jeremy. All in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Right, we'll move to item 8, which is the common seal.
I'll move that, Mr. Chairman.
Moved by
some
Lloyd,
debate about this, but I will second it.
seconded by Eric. Any discussion? If not, with the motion, all in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Right, that should bring us to the end of the public session today. Ask for
Move, we excluded.